Today on the Playbook Podcast, the Democrats win big in every significant election around the country. Dasha and I are here to pick through last night's results. Then we're all watching the Supreme Court this morning as Donald Trump's tariffs face their moment of truth. And this government shutdown is now the longest ever. And are those signs on the horizon I see of it coming to an end? Maybe. Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
Hey, and I'm Dasha Burns. It is Wednesday, November 5th.
And this is the Playbook Podcast. Dasha,
Wow.
We were expecting a late night last night, and it was all done and dusted by 11:30 p.m.
Incredible. A gift to journalists who want to get some sleep, but
we still never get any sleep.
We don't sleep. We run on caffeine and good vibes. But wow, remarkable.
So the Democrats won bigger, I think, than almost anybody was expecting in all of the major races that were happening around the country. I'm sure people listening to the podcast know already the headline results, but Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist candidate, won the New York mayoral in fine style. Looks like he's topped 50% of the vote there. Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, the two moderate Democrats who were running for governorships, both won really big results in Virginia and New Jersey, respectively. And the Proposition 50 vote in California, which we were all wondering, would we get the result last night? Might that one drag on all week? AP called the result within seconds of the polls closing at 11 p.m. Eastern because the margin of victory for Gavin Newsom and the Democrats was so big. So right across the board on the biggest results last night, Dasha, the Democrats did better than I think anyone was really expecting.
Yep, that's right. And I spent a lot of last night and early this morning talking to folks close to the White House. And the feeling is this is not great. One White House ally said to me, it's not doomsday, but the tea leaves are not good. Basically, the main takeaways that I'm hearing from sources on the Republican side, and again, close to the president, are that the Democratic base is more motivated than the Republican base. That's concerning. Trump wasn't on the ballot, and it seems clear now that when he's not on the ballot, Republican candidates have a hard time translating his successes. New Jersey is a prime example where the counties that President Trump won in 2024, Mikey Sherrill took handily this time around. Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican candidate, could not translate the gains that Trump made in that state. But also, Trump allies are worried. They're telling me that people don't think that he's lived up to his promises. They're going to say midterms are a year away, right? But that's going to have a real impact on the conversation going into midterm year here.
It's so interesting that people around Donald Trump are talking like that in private. What we were hearing in public last night was not that messaging from senior Republicans. What they're saying in public was they were criticizing their candidates in these key races, saying that they weren't MAGA enough or that they were weak candidates on paper anyway, criticizing their campaigns and saying that, you need to be more MAGA to get out there and do it. And also trying to play down the importance of results in places like Virginia and New Jersey, which are, of course, in the end, blue states. But in private, as you say, they're feeling a lot bleaker about it. And the flip side, Democrats are gleeful. I don't think they were expecting, particularly the New Jersey result, which many people thought was going to be very close indeed. Some people even wondered if the Republicans might win it. Instead, we're looking at double-digit wins for Mikey Sherrill and indeed for Spanberger in Virginia, and outperforming by miles how Kamala Harris did in these places last year.
Yeah, it's a huge change for the vibe for Democrats, which has been really bleak for most of this year. They are starting to see a path forward. The thing that I'll say is it's a funny dynamic because you've got a pretty far left Democratic Socialist in New York, and you've got these two moderates in Virginia and in New Jersey. So what is the takeaway for Democrats? Like, I don't know that it clarifies that much, like one single path that works. Each candidate really played to the voters in their area. So I don't know that it really solves what the Democratic path forward problem is. The other thing that kind of surprised me as we're recording this, it does look like the margins are much higher for Democrats in New Jersey and in Virginia than for Mamdani. He certainly won handily, but with a lower margin than those other races that we're talking about. Of course, it was a funky one because you had this. You had Cuomo running as an independent, and you had Sliwa, who a lot of Republicans are pretty ticked off at this morning.
I mean, you're quite right. Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, good friends, roommates, in fact, part of that so-called badass caucus from
That's
2018
right.
of Democratic women, but national security focused women, absolutely of the moderate wing of the party. Zohran Mamdani, and I was watching his sort of barnstorming victory speech in New York late last night, absolutely as radical a candidate in a big race as the Democrats have put forward in such a long time. And yet, as you say, both of those wings of the party won big last night. So what can we take away from that? That tells you two things. One, there is real anger at Republicans. Donald Trump has been in the White House now for 10 months, and regardless of what he says, his poll ratings are not great. He is not a popular president by historic standards. And we may be seeing some backlash against that now at the polls, with whoever is a Democrat picking up support. Secondly, what does unite Mamdani and those Democrat moderates is that they all ran on cost of living
Yes.
issues. They were all laser focused on that. They weren't spending their days talking about fights about democracy. They weren't talking about cultural issues, abortion, some of the things that Democrats have run so powerfully along in the past. They were laser focused on cost of living issues. And we know from every survey that that is the number one concern of everyday Americans. And we now see evidence that that sort of campaign is working for the Democrats, whatever type of Democrat you are.
The flip side here is that while Democrats really hammered home economic kitchen table issues in these elections, one simple message I got from one White House ally was simply saying, quote, "The president hasn't talked enough about the cost of living, period." And that is going to be a challenge. Another White House ally told me that these tariffs really are a big problem. That the stock market might be doing well, but they're looking at costs for average Americans, and they are going up. Americans are eating the costs of these tariffs, and they kind of made a parallel to Biden, who kept saying that the economy is doing great, and there were economic indicators that were good. That was true, but Americans were not feeling that. And when you run and the way that Trump did on bringing down costs, on making life more affordable for Americans, and he hasn't been in office a year yet, but he's saying that this is the best economy ever. That's not how people are feeling, and that's potentially becoming a problem not just for him, but for other Republican candidates across the country.
We're going to hear from the president fairly shortly this morning. He's invited the Republican senators over to the White House for breakfast. He's inviting the press in as well. So we're going to hear from him at about 8:30 this morning. So we will get his hot take on the election results shortly. He was, of course, on social media last night, Dasha, as he always is. And we certainly didn't hear from him any suggestion that he might be the problem. We certainly didn't hear from any suggestion that cost of living might be the problem. He said, quote, "Trump wasn't on the ballot and shutdown were the two reasons that Republicans lost tonight, according to pollsters."
I don't think he's wrong about that, because the people that voted for Trump in 2024, most of them, and this was the Trump campaign strategy, most of them were low propensity voters. They do not come out in these kinds of elections, period. And so that certainly was a problem. If Jack Ciattarelli had gotten all of the Trump voters that voted in the last election, this might have been a squeaker. But that just didn't happen. The thing that I'm wondering for the White House and for this president, will they change course a little bit here, at least in messaging with the issues that they talk about? Are they going to get some calls from candidates in the midterms in competitive districts trying to put together a new kind of strategy and get the White House on board to change the narrative?
That phenomenon you describe of MAGA voters not turning out when Trump is on the ballot, of course, we remember that from his first term. It's a sort of known problem. But it's one that they need to address because he ain't going to be on the ballot ever again. This is not some abstract problem. This is the very real immediate electoral future the Republican Party need to address. How do they get their voters out if Donald Trump is not on the ballot?
Speaking of Steve Bannon, he posted last night that the midterms have started, and he says that there are warning signs flashing right now.
Right, and he's absolutely right, because it wasn't just those big four races that we've been talking about so much over the last few weeks that we've talked about so far on this podcast, where Dems did well. They did well everywhere. They won the Supreme Court race in Pennsylvania. They won the voter ID ballot in Maine. They even won races in Georgia, which of course voted for Trump last year. So red state and blue, we've seen Democratic successes last night, and you can see the party will be concerned. And I do wonder the extent to which these sorts of results are going to put the frighteners on Republican members in Congress who are looking at the 2026 next year, those in competitive seats, and will start to panic a little bit when they see the sorts of places and the sorts of margins by which Democrats were winning these elections.
And before we get off of this topic, which I can talk about forever, but the one bright spot for Republicans, and this I had incoming overnight from various allies too of the White House, is Zohran Mamdani. They see him as an asset to the Republican Party. One source texted me saying that New York City mayor is a big job with big consequences. He's Trump's new political foil, and Republicans across the country will use him in attack ads against Democrats. That person also said that it's not a great night for Chuck Schumer, who understandably couldn't endorse Mamdani, but finds himself increasingly out of step with New York Democrats. Another ominous sign for him if he draws a serious primary opponent. So the Mamdani of it all is going to be a big factor for Democrats and for Republicans, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a fascinating dynamic, because the left in America is energized by this guy in a way it hasn't been for years and years, and now has, one of their guys in a real seat of power for the first time in such a long time. At the same time, Republicans see that as a huge opportunity as well. And the Trump versus Mamdani storyline next year is going to be one of the biggest things that dominates the political discourse in this country. We better talk about some of the other very important things happening today, Dasha.
There's so much. Oh,
I know we could unpick the election night forever. We'll obviously continue to talk about it in the days and weeks ahead. But in the Supreme Court at 10 o'clock this morning, the most important case we have heard this year will begin as a number of small businesses challenge Donald Trump's right to impose tariffs on imported goods. The president's centerpiece economic policy, the president's ability to upend the entire global economic trade setup, as he has done over the past 6 months, is basically on the line today. And the fascinating thing about this, Dasha, is no one really seems to have any idea which way the Supreme Court is going to go.
No, I don't think there are a lot of people putting because on this one, just because it is so uncertain. And Trump is not going to court as he floated that he might do. He's instead going to be going to Miami to a business conference. But no doubt, I imagine Trump is like the guys that are at an event and watching football on their phones. I think I think he's going to be keeping a very close eye on what is happening and getting really regular updates, because this is absolutely his centerpiece. I mean, when we talked about how he campaigned on the economy, how some voters are concerned that those promises have not yet been kept. This is how he still believes he's going to keep these promises, even though tariffs are not popular with a lot of American voters, but he is a diehard believer in them. So if this all blows up, it's going to be a huge problem that the White House is not going to have a ton of recourse on. And yeah, it's really not clear how this thing's going to shake out.
There's a sort of very basic understanding of the Supreme Court that because Donald Trump nominated so many of its members, it always backs up Donald Trump. It is far from clear that it will do that this time. This version of the Supreme Court has often embraced executive power, and it supported Trump in many of his power reaches that we've seen this year. The flip side of that is the case looks weak. Frankly, the legislation that Trump is relying on to do this doesn't actually mention tariffs at all. There are many good legal reasons to suggest what he's done is a bit of a stretch to suggest that this is an emergency and he has the power to do something that traditionally Congress has always had the power to do.
Yeah, and by the way, this could be a threat to the coffers that Trump has been touting, that the tariffs have been bringing in all of this revenue. What happens if the court rules against him on that? That could really mess things up for him.
Should say as well, one thing to watch for. This may not be a binary outcome. This may not be a yes or no answer for Trump on tariffs. There are sort of middle ground options that the
Lawyers.
justices, I know, right, could seize upon, where they sort of Trump wins a bit, but some of it gets struck down, and it may be that we end up in that sort of place, which is quite messy, allows him to save face, but nevertheless massively undermines his big economic policy.
Or
That's
not.
not.
Or not, and
Oh, no.
this is status quo now, and precedent is set, and it completely changes how the executive branch deals with the global economic order going forward.
If that wasn't enough political news for you on a Wednesday
Are
morning,
you sick of us yet?
this is also now officially the longest U.S. government shutdown in
Ding ding ding
history.
ding 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 ding.
Congratulations to all concerned. You got there. But are they now about to get out of it? As I said, Trump has called in the senators to the White House for breakfast. And after ranting, as I'm sure he will do this morning, about the candidates who lost this election and why if they'd all listened to Trump, then they would have done much better last night. He wants to talk to the senators clearly about the shutdown, and also wants to talk to them about the filibuster, which he has been posting on social media about daily now for quite a few days, that they should abandon the Senate filibuster, something senators are very reluctant to do. It feels to me like this is moving now, and our colleagues who report on the ground in Congress are saying that real serious meetings, bipartisan meetings, are now taking place. There are Democratic senators now who feel ready to end the shutdown, and it's Trump sort of sounds to me like he might be ready to end it as well. Dasha, if you saw some of his posts on Truth Social last night, I don't know what you thought, but my reading of the runes was this is a guy that's pretty sick of the shutdown now and wants to get this done.
Yeah, no, he's over. I mean, everybody is done with it, and we've talked about how these two milestones that we have now crossed, both the November 1st deadline that really hit Americans, a lot of Americans where it hurts, and this deadline of the election of passing this, and the third win of passing this record. So Democrats can really say like we did everything we could to make our point here. And we talked about for a long, we talked about for many weeks during this shutdown how Trump was like fairly hands off. Then when he got hands on, he asked for the nuclear option. That's not something that Republicans want to do. So I think it is very much the feeling that it is time to get people in a room and to just get this thing sorted out. And nobody's going to be fully happy with the results. That's generally how these things go. That actually is how democracy tends to work. And I do think that there's a good shot that we could see an end here soon.
Yeah, and some senators saying even as soon as this week, although that feels like a bit of a stretch for the Senate to move that quickly. But who knows? Sometimes with these things, they just suddenly happen. And I would not be surprised if we just suddenly see this move at some point in the next few days.
That's
All
right.
right. We better wrap it up there. We've been talking about politics for ages. There's been so much to talk about. And you know what? I reckon there'll be so much to talk about tomorrow as well. Dasha,
Never a dull
thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We've got loads more news and analysis of those election results and teeing up the Supreme Court hearing and everything else in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. And we will be back tomorrow to do it all again. Have a
Thanks
great day.
for sticking with us, guys.
Bye-bye.